Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We've got Tony Gerta on the line from the ozone.net to talk Buckeyes tonight. We appreciate you jumping on with the live chat and invite you to give us your comments, questions, and suggestions. Suggestions we will leave for my channel. I don't think Tony wants your suggestions. He will welcome your comments and your questions, though. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel for the very best in college football coverage across the board. And of course, the focus on Ohio State here with Tony, who has recently posted a couple excellent articles dealing with Isaiah Prince and some of the adversity that he's fought through during his Buckeye career, and also Master Teague and the potential that he brings to campus. Tony, how you doing tonight?
Doing very well. Thank you for having me.
It's all right. We've got this 2019 recruiting class with 9 current hard commits. The latest of which is the 5th-rated wide receiver in the country, according to 247's composite, in Garrett Wilson from Austin, Texas. So what do we know about Mr. Wilson?
Well, what helped Ohio State here is he's originally from Central Ohio. So he's a Columbus kid, and is also the teammate of current Ohio State freshman quarterback Matthew Baldwin. So there's a connection there as well. But he's just a dynamic playmaker, about 6 foot, 185. I think he measured in at the opening this weekend about 6.5 foot and 191 actually. So projects as an outside receiver, pretty fast. I think he ran about a 4.61, but he looks faster than that. Just a guy who can go deep or take the underneath stuff, and is exactly the kind of weapon that Ohio State is looking for outside.
So we're talking about a recruiting class that's going to be signed here in about 5 to 6 months, if it's a December class. And then, of course, the traditional signing class there in February. And what we saw out of the major powers, and specifically Ohio State, was signing roughly 80% of those players in December, if not more. So these guys are going to be on the dotted line soon, but there's going to be all sorts of conjecture and a number of teams and programs that are going to come after these guys in the meantime. So right now, Tony, we've got 9 commits. It seemed as though the Buckeyes were a little bit slow out of the gate, but never to fear. Right now, second in the Big Ten, probably will finish with the #1 class in the conference, top 10 in the country. What jumps out to you? Who do you like? Who do you possibly see coming into the fold soon?
Well, I think the big one in that group is Garrett Wilson. He's the highest rated guy. I think he's maybe could play right away. As far as they've got a couple of running backs that they like, Samson James out of Indiana, and then you've got Steele Chambers, who could be a linebacker, running back, and they'll figure out where he stands. Once they get him on campus. But this is a class that's not even half full. They expected it to pick up around spring football, which is when things, do when you get the unofficials and now the official visits in the springtime. And, now you're going to be getting into next month is summer camps, which brings more visits, more commitments. Right. I think the guy they're waiting on right now is Texas quarterback Grant Gunnell at St. Pius. And he is going to probably commit to his school in June, be it OSU or LSU, maybe one of the Texas schools. But it's interesting because they've started to hand out other offers to quarterbacks, and they're talking to other quarterbacks. They don't necessarily want to put all of their eggs in that basket because that's burned them in the past.
We got Tony Gerta on the line from the ozone.net. Got to join him right there for just in-depth coverage on Ohio State football. The podcasts are available there as well. Tony, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm mixing a podcast, but you've got a Michigan Monday feature, correct?
We have, we do talk quite a bit about Michigan. Not so much on the actually on the podcast. We have been talking about the Amazon show that Jim Harbaugh has, and we're going week by week talking about episode 1 to episode 2. I think this next week will be on episode 5, and there are parts that are probably more entertaining for Ohio State fans, I would think, than for Michigan fans as you get deeper into the season.
Tony, I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back. Well, it's really not a pat on the back, a little pub here, I guess, because I don't know what I did to deserve this. But they contacted me. I don't even remember what is the name of the documentary, the Michigan documentary that you're.
All or Nothing.
Yes, All or Nothing. They contacted me a few months ago and asked me if they could use my audio. And I just thought that this was some two-bit outfit, some college kids or something. And I said, sure. And they sent me a waiver, disclaimer, and the whole deal. And I signed it. And now I've got all sorts of people letting me know that they've heard my voice on the intro of this documentary. And I have yet to hear it myself. But just interesting there. So I'm guessing that, and we're going to steer back to the Buckeyes here very quickly, but what was the feel amongst you and the rest of the staff concerning the Shea Patterson ruled eligibility by the NCAA?
I was happy that he got his eligibility. I think it's good for him. It's good for Michigan, good for the Big Ten. I know I don't think Buckeye fans are too happy about it, simply because they don't ever want anything good to happen to Michigan. But some people talk about the can of worms or the bad precedent, but I think it's a good thing. And I don't know if I buy the fact that he was unaware or misled by Ole Miss, because I'm not sure at that time frame if you could ever be misled by something Ole Miss is telling you. I think if you're misled, you're willingly misled. In terms of the NCAA is not going to hammer us or do this or that. I think everybody was expecting that. And, but still, I want to see what he can do in this offense, in the Michigan offense, with those wide receivers, those running backs, and an improved offensive line with Ed Warner.
I typically don't like to conjecture, but it's almost as though the NCAA was basically ruling that we've told Ole Miss and we've told College Football Nation that those transgressions are awful. Therefore, we've got to back that up. We don't necessarily know if he had a great case to gain his eligibility and the immediate transfer, but we need to continue to hammer home the point that we made originally, that what Ole Miss did was awful, and let's try to deter anyone else from doing such a thing. All right, Tony, we've got a number of questions and comments coming. I almost want to steer you away from the first one, and I'll take this on because we've got Big Poppy JT. He's a regular viewer who says Ohio State's overrated, has the most talent in the country, and always flops. We could go year by year and certainly explain what happened, I think, with the team. Of course, the Urban Meyer era being separated from before that, but 2012, you win all your games, and what else can you do there? You're paying the price for probation. 2013, you win 12 straight. You go to a Big Ten championship game. You lose to a really good Michigan State team that wins the Rose Bowl and finishes in the top 3 or 4 in the nation. 2014, what else can you do? You win it all in dramatic, incredible fashion. 2015, I will separate, Tony, 2015 as being a disappointment in regards to the results, because no opportunity was given to win a national championship. But basically, if you look at Alabama's season and Ohio State season in 2015, it was the same season exactly, except Alabama got a mulligan because Ole Miss helped them out by losing another game, giving them the pathway to the SEC title, and Michigan State won out and didn't allow Ohio State the same thing. Youngest team in FBS in 2016 gets to the playoff. Yes, there was the one horrible disappointment, but they beat some really good teams in 2016. 2017, yes, the Iowa game, people will beat the program up and Urban Meyer up for, but beat a lot of good teams again and finished in the top 5 of the nation. I'm thinking flops a little heavy here, Tony.
I think a lot of teams would take those flops, to reach those heights. It's rare air, and the expectations maybe haven't been met because the expectations are so high. But there are Big Ten titles. To hold teams to I guess Alabama's expectation is fine, but you have to give them Alabama's breaks too. And Alabama is the only one who gets those breaks and gets those gets the benefit of every doubt.
Yeah, and they did this past year. There's no question about it. I thought Ohio State had the better resume in the conference championship, but I understand the argument of best team, even though we
Mhm.
don't know who the best team is. I'm more of a resume guy and thought Ohio State had the resume with the wins in the conference championship. All right, we have people clamoring for a quarterback, a couple pot shots at previous quarterbacks like Terrell Pryor, Troy Smith, and others that weren't necessarily quarterbacks, according to a few of the people commenting here and talking about Urban Meyer and others looking at the quarterback position as a place to put the best athlete on the field.
Well, they have done that before. Braxton Miller was one of the best athletes in the nation, but he did some really incredible things at Ohio State. JT Barrett is only a quarterback. I don't know why people consider him an athlete. He's not a running back. He's not a wide receiver. I mean, Terrell Pryor is one of the greatest athletes in college football history, and wanted to be a quarterback. He could have played defensive end. He could have played safety. He could have done all of these different things, but he wanted to be a quarterback. Troy Smith won a Heisman, so I'm not sure I understand. We're talking about Ohio State. We're not talking about the NFL. And so,
Absolutely.
with Braxton Miller, the shoulder injury took him out. JT Barrett owns tons of records, Big Ten records, Ohio State records. Now you're looking at two guys in Joe Burrow and Dwayne Haskins, who I guess maybe fit the profile more that people would consider quarterbacks, even though you look at the Big Ten record books, and there's plenty of Buckeyes in that quarterback conversation. They just don't extend it into the NFL. And that is something that I believe irks Urban Meyer because they can't use it as a recruiting tool. And so that's sort of the next step in, being DBU, being wide receiver U, being this U, that U. They have no claim to the quarterback position. And I think we've seen a change, even though the coaches don't say it's a change, but a change to some more pocket passers who can get out of trouble rather than running quarterbacks who can also throw it. They say they're not changing their philosophies, but maybe they are. And I think maybe part of it is because they're not producing NFL quarterbacks, and I think that's the one thing maybe missing from the program.
Yeah, sometimes the passage of time clouds memories. Go back and look at Troy Smith's statistics and the videotape in his career at Ohio State. He was certainly pass first, run second, was a threat once he took off with it and had a 100-yard rushing day against Michigan in particular. I believe in 2004, he really torched him for like a 300, 100-yard game. But 30 touchdowns and 6 picks as a Heisman winner, that's pretty good quarterbacking. And there's a game, Tony, that stands out that Troy Smith played in the NFL when he was with the Niners near the end of the season against a bad Rams team, albeit this game was off the radar, two bad teams. But he put up like 335 in an overtime game, pulled out the game. And this was just prior to the weird illness that he contracted, and then kind of derailed him for a year and really set him back. And he was really never the same and didn't really have a chance to do anything past that. So we're going to get back to the here and now with Tony Gerta from the Ozone and talk some Ohio State football. So we talked to you, Tony, right before the spring game. You had your thoughts about what the team had accomplished and what the storylines were going into the spring game. So we're looking at quarterback, and we have talked that to death. I don't know that there's any ground that we're going to cover there. But the two spots that I want to hit on is the field safety position, the spot opposite Jordan Fuller. Now I'm getting them mixed up after our conversation before we started to record. But Isaiah Pryor seemed to be the guy that was in line, at least at the beginning of camp. He got slow out of the gate. He rallied. Do you have a feel for where we stand and what players are in the mix?
Yeah, I mean that entire situation, because the field safety plays the wide side of the field, the boundary plays the short side, but they switched towards maybe the first week or two into spring camp. So Jordan Fuller is now the field safety after playing boundary safety last year. So some musical chairs going in there. Isaiah Pryor went into the spring thinking he was going to compete for the field safety, and that's what he had planned for. And then, they get switched. So it sort of took him a little while, and it's still taking him a little while to become the boundary safety, the deep safety that they need. Now, he's plenty athletic enough. He can cover ground. He's fast, but he didn't take the job over like they wanted. So he's still competing with Jocelyn Wint and Brendan White, who are two sophomores like he is. Got a freshman coming in, Josh Proctor, one of the top safeties in the nation out of Oklahoma. So he might get involved there as well. I don't think he would win the job, but they've had freshman safeties in the two deep the past few years. Isaiah Pryor was one. Jordan Fuller was one. But I still think Isaiah Pryor is going to win that job because he is the type of player they want at that position. He's similar to Jordan Fuller, who was there last year, similar to Malik Hooker in terms of athleticism. I don't like to throw that name around there because it's when you say that puts some expectations that nobody can meet. But he has that athleticism and maybe some of that range as well.
Tony, we've got a few viewers asking in the secondary, staying right there, asking about your thoughts about Jeffrey Okuda and Sean Wade.
Yeah, I really, really like Wade. He's redshirt freshman, couldn't play last year because he had an abdominal tear, which he actually played through at times during the spring and summer, but he wasn't able to go. He's probably the fourth cornerback right now, and I don't know that they're going to rotate four. They may. It might go more than the three that they're planning on. Jeff Okuda he was out this spring with a shoulder surgery, but he has established himself based on last year as one of the top three corners. So he will rotate and basically be considered a starter with Damon Arnett and Kendall Sheffield. They've had a three-man rotation each of the previous 2 years. They're going to continue that. And Jeff Okuda is in line to be the next big thing at corner. This year it's probably going to be Kendall Sheffield. His name is already appearing on mock drafts and first rounds and top 20s and those things. He owns he ran track this spring, owns, and set the 60-meter record at OSU. So that's the guy to watch this year. But Jeff Okuda, I have yet to talk to anybody at Ohio State who does not have the utmost confidence that he is going to be very special.
Subscribe to my YouTube channel for the very best in college football coverage with top media contributors like Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone, and you got to join him right there, theozone.net, for Ohio State football coverage. All right. I know that they play different positions, so I hate to group all the wide receivers together, but this group frustrates me, intrigues me, all of the above. They put up some numbers last year, more so than they had the previous couple years. But I guess I'm just measuring them against the Michael Thomas, Jalen Marshall group of 2014 and 15 and how productive those guys were. And I just don't see that kind of playmaking ability and outfighting the defenders consistently for the football. Sure, they're making plays, but of course, just KJ Hill, one of the more productive guys. But what would be your pecking order? We're talking like 6, 8 guys. There's just so many of them.
Yeah, the pecking order is interesting because Zack Smith, receivers coach, really considers their top 6 as 6 starters. They've got 2 X's, 2 H's, and 2 Z's, and those guys rotate constantly. So when you look at their numbers, they're going to be maybe like half of what they should as starters be. So you almost have to combine, like Benjamin Victor and Austin Mack at X, and then you'd have maybe 40 catches, 10 touchdowns, 700 yards. Same thing at Z with Terry McLaurin and Johnny Dixon. And Paris Campbell and KJ Hill were 1 and 2 on the team in catches last year, putting up similar numbers to Curtis Samuel in 2016. So there is that. There is the production, but it's not as consistent as you would like because there is Benjamin Victor has his head drops. Paris Campbell is not the deep threat that he should be because he has issues with his hands. KJ Hill is not the explosive guy like Paris Campbell. He's more of just a possession guy over the middle, slot guy who I don't even think he averaged 10 yards a catch last year. So that gives you an idea of what he does, but he's very reliable. They like him. But they need that. They don't have Devon Smith, the guy who can stretch the field. And Terry McLaurin has the speed, doesn't have the consistency yet. Johnny Dixon has some explosive plays in him. The thing with you look at all of their game logs, and anybody on that list can go 3 or 4 games without a catch. And so that's the issue that I have with the group, where yeah, they might be rotating, but they should still be getting, even if they're rotating, get 2 or 3 catches a game and produce something. So you can have Johnny Dixon go 5 or 6 games without a catch. Benjamin Victor only a few catches in Big Ten play. So I need to see more consistency every week from those guys.
Yeah, so Devon Smith was the name that I held back in my back pocket that I was going to throw out there. That's the guy that they really haven't replaced. For as good as Michael Thomas was and now is in the NFL, just having a remarkable first 2 years in the NFL, I think by some measurements, the greatest start in the history of the NFL in terms of yards and catches combined. And then Jalen Marshall was productive and left a year early, probably shouldn't have. But yeah, Devon Smith, what he contributed to this offense just can't be discounted in any way. I think outside of Buckeye Nation, maybe one of the more underrated players, superstar players in recent history of college football, just devastating what he did in a limited number of catches, devastating catches in big games.
And Cardale Jones gets a lot of credit for that 2014 postseason run, but it was Devon Smith making catches on 50-50 balls, especially against Wisconsin, that sort of set the tone and got this momentum going. And yeah, that's a guy that they haven't been able to replace. But in 2014, the coaches were telling us this is the best deep ball receiver they've ever had. So it's going to be hard to replace that guy. What they need is just a good deep ball catcher. They don't need the best of all time. They would settle for a good one. And that's what they need from Terry McLaurin, a 5th-year senior, Johnny Dixon, a 5th-year senior, Paris Campbell, 5th-year senior. It's time for those guys to become fully developed and produce where they've been lacking.
We've got a comparison here on the chat. Tony Gerdeman is joining us from the ozone.net, and please join him right there. Tony, CJ Saunders, comparison to Hunter Renfrow.
Well, there are physical similarities. But CJ Saunders he's the 3rd H-back for Ohio State, just a slot receiver. Gets open, not the fastest guy, not the strongest guy. He had to put some weight on in the offseason because he was mainly just playing in blowouts because he wasn't strong enough to run block. And if you're going to be a receiver at Ohio State, you have to be able to run block. So putting on weight in the offseason, he said he would eat cheap Kroger steaks and peanut butter sandwiches, wake up in the middle of the night, eat some peanut butter sandwiches or eat some peanut butter sandwiches before bed and just let it sit in his gut and try to put on weight that way. But he's a guy who started as a corner at Ohio State. And like I said, a walk-on, still a walk-on. He may be, if they end up having an available scholarship, he might be able to be on scholarship this season. Gets open, catches the ball, but he's I mean, you're not going to get in front of Paris Campbell or KJ Hill or even DeMario McCall. It's going to be tough. That's a 3rd guy we're not even talking about, DeMario McCall, who's a dynamic running back who moved to H. And that's a very deep position. Might be the deepest position on the roster because in the summer, they'll be adding 5-star running back Jalen Gill to that mix. So it's a pretty good group.
So it's a long list of productive tight ends, and not just productive, but so talented and fitting within the scheme of the offense. Forget the numbers that have moved on to the NFL, that we've seen a number of them forge pretty successful seasons and careers in the NFL. And Jeremy Ruckert seems to be the next one in line, possibly, has yet to step on the field and produce anything or show us anything in a game that means anything. But your thoughts about the new tight end?
Well, when Urban Meyer says he's the best tight end he's ever scouted or recruited, your ears are gonna perk up. I don't know how physical he'll be as a true freshman and how much run blocking they'll do or he will do. Kevin Wilson has already talked about what they will be able to do with him or their plans for him. There are plans for him because of what he can do as a pass catcher. So they would put him in a position to do what he can, wouldn't ask him to do stuff that he can't. They don't need him to be a run blocker. They just need him to be maybe split him out a little bit or be a second tight end in a two tight end set. Kevin Wilson wants to do more tight end sets, two tight end sets. But yeah, he's a guy who is 6'6", probably arrive at like 235, 240, can stretch the field, can run after the catch. 5-star guy who, if Urban Meyer says he's the best he's ever seen or recruited, then they like to put the ball into Playmakers' hands, find the best ways to get them involved. And he's a playmaker, so they'll look for some way to get him involved.
Folks, if you just caught us here and maybe missed a portion of the beginning of the segment here with Tony Gerdeman, we're going to wrap up here in just a second. You can jump back at Mark Rogers TV on YouTube right here, and you can catch the full conversation. It'll take like 2 minutes to process, and it'll be right there in its entirety. If you love college football, and regardless of what I'm talking about or what team, you want to stick around for Jake Evans and the Rebel Walk, we're talking Ole Miss football in just a couple minutes. So keep it right here. Tony, we appreciate you stopping by. I always love the insight, getting caught up on the personnel, and hope to have you back soon.
All right. Thanks for having me. Have a good night.